Hi everyone, how you doing? Oh, lovely to have you here again for our Tuesday chat as promised. Welcoming all my regular listeners into this conversation and anyone who's new to the channel here on YouTube and my Facebook family also. Yeah, so lovely to have you here. I'm Caroline. I'm the founder of Flourish by Design, and I run this podcast called FlourishbydesignTV, which is based on femme leadership, where I ask powerful questions to unfold the true you, which is, yeah, this true woman that we are discovering after each one of these sessions. So, this week's question I'm asking, or this topic that we're uncovering, is something that came out of last week's conversation, and it's just I'm really enjoying these. I'm a lecturer in Griffith College, and I have a busy schedule, and I teach night students as well. I had a great fun last night. I was teaching until nearly 10 o'clock at night with 28 mature students, and we had so much fun. It really was. And I think it's funny, sometimes I'm teaching design and I'm teaching life at the same time, and we have so much fun, mixing up the analogies. And yeah, we were talking about this time last week at the end of the show. I was talking about the idea of, the fact that women are we truly committed to ourselves? That's what our topic from last week is. That when we say the word commitment, which had kind of come up the previous week, often we think about who we are in relation to a commitment to another person, to our partner, and then out of that, thinking about how committed are we to ourselves, and that led on to thinking about what happens when we're not committed to ourselves. Yeah, what happens in the inside, the internal world, this inner world of a woman when she's not committed to herself. A persona, starts to arrive in response to all the expectations that society puts on women. And for, any males listening to this, just put yourselves in our shoes and think that active empathy on both sides can really, really help communication and understanding, and the smooth harmony of relationships, and understanding that the expectations that society puts on women, and from very early age, huge expectations on women to look a certain way, to behave a certain way, how to, all the roles that you have to fulfill, in your life, to be mother, daughter, sister, wife, girlfriend, whatever it is. And then, in work, your work roles, and then also keeping the house, doing whatever, keep the family together and keeping the harmony and all of those interconnected relationships. And then also, being fit and healthy and trying to keep yourself in a fit state. This is it's a huge expectation and weight that is I suppose we wouldn't say put on us, because we can choose that as well. What I would say is, it becomes, what happens is, this inner expectation arrives in within us, and there's two reactions, I would say, that happen to women when we start to come to the age where we realize that this is the way society is designed, and this is how, these expectations arrive on our doorstep as such. We start to realize, what are we going to do with this? And two personas, two paths maybe arrive, and what happens is, sometimes we could choose a persona of becoming this good girl, as I was talking about last week, the good girl, or the rebel. These two completely different opposite reactions to what societal expectations on a woman, and how she's to live her life. And I was just, having fun with this, talking about this during the week as well. And it was bubbling up in my mind. And I said I'd share some stories in my own life and for you to have a little think about, what pattern had you followed, because it's like as if we can recognize it when we see in another person. It becomes like I think it's like a clan. I used to live in Scotland for a few years, and think about the tartan. I often think about the tartan. The tartan. Each clan, each family name has a tartan, and it has a special design basically for that family, and it's a certain pattern. I often think, you know, everybody has their own patterns of behavior that they've grown up or gone into, and when you see it in somebody else, you kind of go, oh yeah, they're one of my clan. So it is something that when we recognize and we hear other people speak about, that we can resonate with, and we can understand that, oh wow, I've done that too. And I thought it was interesting to share that actually I've adopted both of those personas during my life at different stages. And, out of, I would say, I'm using the word reaction because out of an unconscious reaction to, different things that have happened in my life. So I would say in two different decades, it turned up. In my 20s, I was definitely the rebel, absolutely the rebel. And in my 30s, I was the good girl. So I fluctuated between the two, and both with a response to different life events. And I definitely think when I was in my teens, I was quite shy, and I was quite, I suppose, I was always a big set of eyes watching, and looking and listening, and I always had that connection of to knowing where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. But when I got to my teens, I had decided I wanted to go to art college actually, and that was actually in response to my family was supposed to actually emigrate when I was 16 to Australia actually, and I was told we were leaving, we were going to immigrate to Australia, and I was so unbelievably excited because I was going to a secondary school at the time that I just, it was horrible. I just hated it. It was so restrictive. It was so the opposite of what I had known in primary school. When I grew up in the countryside, it was absolutely beautiful, and I had a small little country. Well, it's actually a very modern school at the time. It was newly built. All the men in the village had done a lot of fundraising for a new school to be built, and in my village, the men really put so much work into building up the amenities in the village for the children and for the young people to have, sporting fields that they could play sports in, and then to also for the young people and for a hall. They built a big hall that we could have concerts in, and we had 2 concerts a year, and we had big gatherings, and it was just a hub of the village, but they had got this together, and yeah, we had decided that I had a beautiful school there. They had built a new school as well, and it was just beautiful. But then when I went to secondary school, it was completely the opposite. It was really, really strict, very old style education, and it was very restrictive. And I was told that we were going to move away, and I wouldn't have to do my leaving cert, and I was just so excited about it. But then didn't turn out, and we decided that as a family we were just moving house. So I reacted to that hugely, and decided, no, nobody is ever going to tell me what to do again. I'm going to make my own decisions in my life. And I decided I was going to go to art college. So I rebelled into kind of in a good way, really, because I rebelled the fact that I was the first person in my family to go to college, and out of 17 grandchildren, and I rebelled into doing exactly what I wanted to do, a course that nobody knew what it even meant at the time. Visual communications, it just wasn't something that anyone recognized. It was like when we're talking about AI now, it was completely, you know, futuristic nearly, and I rebelled into that, and I rebelled into, moving out of Ireland. I said, no, I'm absolutely not living in Ireland. I used to say to my mother, don't think I'm ever going to live in Ireland. Like, I'm gone. I rebelled out of my country. I rebelled out of the countryside that I grew up in. I rebelled. I kept rebelling until, I traveled the world and I kept going. I thought I would never get married. Why would you get married? Especially after my parents had actually broken up then when I was 18. And I just thought, well, that's absolutely a waste of 20 years of your life. Why would you ever get married? So I rebelled, against everything. I just thought society had put so much expectations on women, and I had gone into this whole rebellion of society, you know. And what's funny about it now, when I look back at that, I can really see that even though I thought I was being true to myself, that it was actually a really a huge response, a reaction to adverse experiences that I was reacting to. So I had a lot of negativity in me. I had a lot of anger and resentment, and I had a lot of emotions that were not fully, I would say, integrated into myself, And it was like this was a fire in me that was moving me forward in not such in a way that it showed up as ambition, but was it really making me happy? Definitely wasn't, you know. It wasn't an energy that was, I would say, flourishing now that I talk about, blossoming and flourishing into our true identity. It was an adaptation of who a rebellion of trying to be put into a persona that I didn't feel I was connected to, but I wasn't actually connected into the true harmony of life. I was battling with life. Life became a battlefield to me, and that I was always out there, battling life, and I had to, push my way through, and I had to overcome everything on my own. And I was very independent. I was fiercely independent, and I was like, I didn't need, you know, I I didn't I didn't cherish, um, things that I cherish now. It was very much goal orientated, and really did very well in my career and everything, but definitely more, I would say, on the workaholic side of things. And I wasn't thriving, even though when I say I was doing well in life, I was absolutely, materially, and I was accomplishing a lot. But is that really flourishing? Is that really feeling abundant within yourself? I definitely think no, it wasn't, you know. It wasn't in a way that I was coming from a really warm, loving place within myself. I was actually coming from a a fear, I guess. There was a fear of not, maybe, of trying to achieve this goal that I would be able to prove myself. I had to prove something, and I had to prove that I didn't need anybody, and I didn't need, you know, the I didn't need the warmth of, I would say, the I would say, like, even that femininity, that I always talk about now. It was more a masculine, goal orientated, pushing through, forcing through life, battling with life, against life, not a marriage to life, and not working with life. It was working against life, and that life was actually coming at me, and I was actually trying to battle it all the time. It was a completely different experience of living, and really interesting because eventually that, I got worn out with that, and that's when I think a lot of people suffer from burnout and suffer from total exhaustion because you're going on, I suppose we would have gone out an awful lot as well. So a lot of partying and a lot of like nights out and working really hard during the week and then hitting the pub on the Friday night, Saturday night, and then, just trying to get over that and then get back up and go to work on the Monday and work really hard, work long hours and 2 o'clock in the morning and campaigns. And it was always the next biggest launch and the next biggest thing and next big client and the next big um, I would say brief, trying to get new work into the agency, and it was great vibes and it was a great push and it was very exciting at the time. But eventually that wore itself out because it became, exhausting and meaningless. Eventually money doesn't fill that kind of gap that you have within yourself, and you know you're only as good as the last big design job that you did, and there's always more deadlines and always more pressure on time, and it was like a little bit of a drug really, to just this living on this adrenaline and on the cutting edge, which I love being on the cutting edge, but the cutting edge of what, what type of work. So I started to get really interested in like what other work, and more meaningful work, and started moving, then deciding to go and work for myself so I could choose the more interesting work, and going from more corporate work and commercial work to more um, work with government bodies and working with the HSC and health and well-being and everything like that. So when I got to my 30s, then I had really got to the stage where the rebel was burnt out in me, to be quite honest. I had exhausted the rebel for about 10 years, of that battling with life. And yeah, it became more mellow because I realized that, that persona, didn't work out for me, and it wasn't something that was fulfilling to me anymore, and I wanted to soften down. And then I got engaged, and I said, okay, maybe I will try this marriage thing and I'll see how that goes, and settle down and maybe start a family. And it was very hard for me to settle down, actually. I found it because I'd done a lot of traveling for a long time, and I'd moved around. My family had moved around a lot, and I had moved around houses an awful lot as well. So then when I got married, I changed my persona, and then I went into this good girl. So the good girl became a perfectionist, you know, the perfectionist of becoming the perfect wife and the perfect mother and the perfect host and have the perfect house and the perfect everything, And it's interesting because when I think about it now, when I look back at what I would call, the good girl, it was always around looking for validation. It moved from, this accomplishment that I was looking for in the rebel to, this validation of, everyone, friends and families around me saying that I was doing a great job, and I had everything so organized and everything was so perfect that it was actually, but the truth of it is that perfectionism is protectionism, So you're not in harmony with life either, because you're doing it from a sense of wanting to be seen as perfect and having everything okay. So you'll be validated again by society. So that was a conformity into society. Before, I was trying to rebel against society and to not fit in, to do it my way or the highway. And the other persona, which was the good girl, was conforming and completely conforming into the fact that I actually completely lost my own identity in the fact that I became this, the good girl and pleasing everybody and totally pacifying everybody and serving everybody else's needs before mine. So it was a complete opposite and become actually very dependent actually rather than independent that I had been in my 20s. I became extremely dependent because I had two small kids and I was working from home and I was really poured myself into the kids and I would never, I would think that was an amazing time. I absolutely loved that. And they really softened me down and they taught me about presence and they taught me about, you know, I suppose that femininity really blossomed in me in my 30s, so the full uh, of my 30s, I was really on the other side. I was completely feminine. I was like nearly, that masculine side in my 20s, that adventurous and active and that, goal getting side of me was gone into completely very creative and very, loving and just always with the kids and spending all my time with them, which I absolutely loved. But again, it was actually to the stage where I had lost my identity in that as well. So I'd lost my identity in the rebel and in the working world and in working too hard and that workaholic. And then I lost myself in the good girl in totally being, stay at home mom and that that mother persona, and the good girl for everybody and pleasing everybody and leaving myself last, which is really interesting because I would look at it now. And then in my 40s, I started on that quest for, the burnout had happened again when it came to with the kids, and not so much in the way of exhaustion, but in way of that, I realized that as they were starting to go into secondary school, that, this question of who am I, beyond my kids, beyond my parents, and beyond my family, and beyond, serving everybody, who am I? And that role of the good girl started to diminish as well. And I had kind of exhausted that role too. So started to look into in my 40s what was the who am I and ask the bigger questions. Because what's interesting to think about is when we look at the rebel, the rebel is a fear-based persona, you know, because it's running from the the reality of, maybe sitting and going into a feeling a sense of security in belonging into society, because the rebel sits outside of society and doesn't feel like they actually belong. They don't feel like they're acceptable, and they feel that they're not acceptable, so they don't want to be accepted and they sit outside and they try to, I suppose, go against everything. And it's a very kind of a negative mindset, and it can be very cynical and it can be very cold in the experience of, I suppose, not receiving, not allowing in. It's a protective persona, because we're always have our armor on. If you're in a battlefield, you always have to wear armor because you have to protect yourself. So you have this armor on to protect yourself in this battlefield of life and you're pushing yourself through. But then you can't let anybody in really. You might let people in to a certain point, but you still have your armor on. You're still not vulnerable. You're not really opening up and being your true self. So it's interesting to look at that. And is that something that you've experienced yourself in your life at some stage as well? And you recognize that it's a defense mechanism, from reactions and especially from, I suppose from my parents broke up as well, not really sitting and getting help with looking at that and feeling a sense of security. So that sense of security was always a big coping and trying to find security in in the world, but seeing it as difficult, a difficult landscape to live in, and that life is quite um, hostile, looking at life as a hostile environment as such, and then going into the good girl, and then, you know, softening down hugely and having no armor on whatsoever and no boundaries and completely letting people in and walking all over you and not saying things and pushing things under the carpet and pretending that everything's okay when it's not okay. There's not a lack of boundaries and a lack of, and just becoming over dependent on other people's expectations. That's an abandonment of ourselves also. It's not, and it's also a sense living with a sense of fear too, because the fear of displeasing others or to disappointing people, you know, or letting people down, and always wanting to keep other people happy around you so that you can feel okay, and an understanding that when somebody else is upset with you because maybe you said something that, you needed to say, that the, the discomfort of that was too much to bear. So it's better just to say nothing and just to push it under the carpet. That's a really an interesting one as well for women, and it's hugely prominent with so many women that I sit and talk to, and I can really see that plan, that pattern in so many women, especially in Ireland, and I suppose there's a lot of the rebel, a lot of the good girl, the compliancy, and afraid to say it, and it becomes a pattern that over years and years and years that is just something becomes ingrained on us, and we forget, the sense of who we are, and that is the question that is asked again and again when I sit with women about that, going through this transition in their lives. Maybe sometimes it's coming up to a significant birthday or a stage in their life where something has changed, like, children getting older, going to school or going to secondary school or going to college or going to on to doing different things. They start to question that, and that's when those two personas often pop up, the rebel or the good girl, realizing that, have I ever actually been really true to myself, you know and who am I beyond those roles that I have in my life, and actually the next book um I have it written a long time, but I haven't published it yet, and it hasn't had it's like as if it was under the ground and it wants to grow and blossom. It's called Silence Republic. And I think that is actually what's happening with these talks, because if I put these out, and I just feel in my heart that I need to share this content now at this time. But a lot of women are kind of sitting with me and having these conversations, and it's opening up something in them that it's time really to start to uncover that, who am I beyond my roles, and that's what I had done when I turned 40. And I started to ask myself, I did a list of, I am a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a lecturer, I'm a sister, and I listed everything out. And then I started to make another list and said, but I'm not just a woman, I'm not just a daughter, I'm not just a sister, I'm not just, and then who am I, And I started to unfold, what's my intrinsic value, What is the value that I came here with, that's beyond, my physical appearance? What is intrinsic value that I hold within me? What is it that I came here to do? And that calling was something that started to really bubble up inside me. And I think because I had maybe spent those decades, playing out those false identities I had of myself, of the rebel and of the good girl, that I had exhausted those, and I was open to understanding open or finding out or wanting to discover, you know, these two these identities outside of myself were false, and then they crumbled over time, and that thought system and these ideas I had about myself, which are basically identities, is the idea that I have about who I am. And that's what I have the workshop about. Who do you think you are? So it's an idea that we have in our head of who we are. So it's something that we think we are, an identity that we think we are. But that's just a thought. But when we go into our heart and we start to think, we start to feel into what is my essence? What's my essence identity? And what is it that I'm here to do? And what am I here to share? And what is the song in my heart? And sometimes I say, it's like a treasure chest or a jewelry box. You think about a jewelry box. I remember being as a girl, as a young girl, having this beautiful jewelry box, and I absolutely loved it. And I didn't have much jewelry at the time, but I remember getting, you know, often when you put your chains and your jewelry into the jewelry box, they get kind of tangled up, and you have to untangle them. But when we find that jewelry box, that we're looking for all these gems and jewels and beautiful crystals and all the gorgeous, you know, I suppose riches of the world, to know that actually we have that within ourselves, within our own chest, within our treasure chest, that we can find our intrinsic value within ourselves, and it's not outside of ourselves. And that persona of the rebel and the good girl, it's actually coming together and emerging of those two in the center, that helps us really find out who we truly are. Because when we start to integrate both of those personas and really bring them back into ourselves and bring our energy from the outside of ourselves into ourselves, and we start to merge those and start to use them in a way that is, I say, life giving, and that is in harmony with life. And we start to plug into life rather than rebelling against it or denying, what's happening in our life. We start to actually get in tune with life and what life is asking us to do. Then we can bring out the rebel and the good girl, as in the rebel is using her voice. She will actually speak up for things that are not just, and she will stand up for for what she finds most important in her life. The injustices of life. She would put her energy and her rebellious nature and that persona into that in a productive way, not a destructive way, not a self-destructive way, and not a destructive way in society. And that is integrated inside herself. And then there's also the good girl. So still that good girl, bring her in, but what is she good? She's there to share and to care and to serve, again in a larger way, but also has a really strong, healthy boundaries. She is still the good girl in helping and caring for and nurturing for others, because we enjoy that so much. But she also has learned about boundaries and how to protect herself and how to nourish herself and how to surround herself with a beautiful circle circle of friends that nourish her and that give her that food that she needs to flourish. So it's an integration of both and the balance of both of those personas, but that come from that true self, and that's that true woman that we want to embody at this time. And it is that calling, because it's absolutely fascinating and amazing to me what happens to women when they actually start to do that. And I am blown away by witnessing that happening with women around me. I absolutely think it's just miraculous, to be quite honest, because having relationship with women over the last, all of my life, and knowing that all of those patterns, and that we sit together in conversation, we have our chats, like we're having here our Tuesday night chat, and it's just you hear that pattern being repeated over and over again, and we enter into that pattern together, and we share those patterns, but often we don't do the integration work and find out what's beyond that, what's beyond those two personas that are based on fear and insecurity. When we become really secure in ourselves, and we find we honor ourselves, and really tap into that intrinsic value that we have for ourselves, then we can still use those elements that we've, those skills, that strength and that softness in our characteristics. But we are here on a mission and a purpose, and that mission and purpose starts to unfold. And that's what I'm really excited about, unfolding the true you. And it just is so amazing to see the women that I've seen integrate our areas and personas within themselves of the good girl or the rebel into themselves, into their heart, and starting to live from their true self and what is unfolding for them, and how much life is coming to meet them, to greet them. It's just amazing, because it's like you just have to you go 50%, and then life comes to meet you. It comes to greet you. It's completely the opposite of, the idea of the rebel and life being a battlefield, and that was nobody's there for you. It's the opposite. When you come back into your heart and you go into the world in a loving way, that show up true to you, that life comes out to greet you, and all of help and guidance and friends or opportunities just arrive and show you, yes, this is your path, this is your destiny, this is where we're bringing you. You do belong. You don't need to be outside of society and to be the rebel. Life is inviting you in, and you belong here with us, and you have a place, and you have a purpose, and you have a reason to be here, and we need you. We've been waiting for you. It's amazing. It really is. And then the good girl, that actually you can come out of the shadows, and you can find your voice again, and you can actually be dependent and interdependent, so you can have those beautiful relationships that you enjoy so much, but you can also have a beautiful relationship with yourself. And it is okay to put yourself first, because that's how you really care for other people, is to care for yourself, number one, because everybody will benefit from that. So it's finding that balance. And then you enter into that Shlina Cree, as I say, the way, the pathway of the heart opens up, and you start to walk along that, So it's so, yeah, I just think to myself, I wonder to myself, the possibility of what humanity can be if more and more women start to blossom into their true selves and become true, that commitment to becoming a true woman, because it is just so life-giving. You're entering back into life. And again, the good girl, she seems like she's in life, she seems like she's in the family, she seems like she's connected to everybody, but actually often she's very lonely in herself, because she's not being her true self, she's not being true to herself. So she's abandoned herself while she's in this warm family. I wonder if that is, and if you're listening to me now, do you feel that? You might be surrounded by family and friends, but how connected do you feel? How much of a sense of belonging do you feel? Do you feel like you belong, or do you feel that you're just there and nobody's accepting you for who you are? You feel that there's elements of yourself that you've hidden, because that's, it's not sustainable, eventually that crumbles. And it's beautiful when I see the women that I talk to start to really blossom into who they are. They get this glow about them, and they get this radiance, and they get this confidence, and they start to really trust life, and they start to feel secure and really part of the harmony of life, and relationships improve. And again, you know, I think men are only, I really feel from my experience, not just saying it, but from my experience of the men that I know and the men that I'm in studying with, the men that I'm in college with, the men that I'm teach, the men that my family and friends. I just feel that actually men are just really, really would love to see women blossom. They're just crying out for that because we give them energy. When we blossom into our true selves, then they get energized by that. It's just like in nature. You know, it just is this flow of energy from the whole orchestra of life working together in harmony, because the ecosystem of humanity needs both masculine and feminine to be in balance. It needs to be in balance within ourselves. Like the good girl is the feminine and the rebel is the masculine side of us. And how do we balance both of those within ourselves and then come into our true identity and blossom into the world that really designs that beautiful human design of a healthy ecosystem where everyone can flourish, because when women are happy and they're, flourishing, and the children are flourishing, and the husbands and the partners and the boyfriends and all of that, becomes much more robust and strong, and they have a sense of security around you, and you can create that beautiful guidance and support and wisdom for all of those connected with you. So I hope that's thought provoking for you this week again, and it's a little bit longer because there was two elements that I had to bring together on that. But just to love you to listen in and just to see like where do you think you are sitting, or is there anywhere that you can balance? Is it you're feeling you're the rebel and you're seeing life as a battlefield that you have to force and you have to push through, and life is against you, and you have to armor up and you have to have this thick armor on, you can't let anybody in, and it's hard to get close to you, to be vulnerable and to share your truth and to share maybe difficulties that's happened in your life, and you protect yourself by keeping that on, and there's a kind of a hardness about how you interact with people? Or is it the opposite, where you're the good girl and you please everyone and you're afraid to actually say what you need to say and what needs to be said, and you find boundaries difficult, and you find, get very drained and very, I would say, depleted from difficult conversations with people that could be, conflict might, when conflict arises. Do you see that you maybe would love to say something and don't say it? You might spend 2 or 3 days thinking about, oh my God, I should have said this, and why did I say that? And you say to your friends, but you never really know how to address a problem in a constructive way. And so people know how to treat you properly, and how you can have more confidence in opening up and saying what needs to be said. Yeah. So just looking at that, and thinking about what is the balance between those. And if I come back into my own essence and I really invest in my own essence identity, which is within me, not outside of me, and these ideas of who I think I am, but start to dig down into who am I truly, and then showing up in that true way and being true to yourself. So I hope that's thought provoking for you. And I'll talk to you next week, and we'll have another little chat I had actually an idea that I might talk to you about next week that somebody suggested to me, and I'm going to open it up and think about it, and I'll post it in the advert on the Mondays just to give you a little bit heads up on that. So anyone who's listening back on the playback, thank you for your company. As always, absolutely love to have any comments, or, this always opens up another conversation during the week with friends. And again, when I'm finished my next couple of papers, I'll start up the chat show and we can get that going. And I'll open these conversations up to a few other women. I'm going to get three others. So there'll be four of us on the screen each time. And we can just, yeah, let's open this up, because really what I'm so excited about, I'm so interested in, it's like a research question that I'm walking with at the moment. What is the true woman? Because in society, she has been covered over for so many centuries. And it's only through the exploration and the archaeology that we can, reveal her and reveal who, reveal our true power in the world, and our sovereignty. And I think women's value and honoring of themselves is really the solution to so many problems in the world. So just being true to you is the best you can do at this time. Okay, I hope that helped you guys, and I'll talk to you on, I might do a quick live on Friday as well with my Friday reflection. So I hope you have a wonderful week. It's gone extremely cold here in Ireland now. It's gone from, it was actually nice and warm, and we were in our, well, I'm actually in my lighter things today now, but I had a cardigan over it earlier on, but it actually has dipped really cold, absolutely freezing. So I'm looking forward to going to London next week, actually, and we have a beautiful celebration of 55 Faces that is going to be launched. I'm a co-author on next Friday night on the 29th, actually, in London. So there's a big group of us coming together for that, and everyone's invited to come along if you're free, or if you would like to join us. I'm really looking forward to sharing that with Michelle Gardner's group and all the other beautiful women there. So I'll share more about that with you on Friday. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and talk to you again. Bye.